it is a challenging industry. Architecture and engineering and even construction, they're hard industries for graduates, and they're expected to learn a lot of things very fast. So just come in with an open mind, and just be ready to put in some really hard work before you get to the good stuff.
You're about to enter the Archgyan podcast.
Archgyan podcast,
India's first and very own architecture podcast, where you'll hear the insights, experiences, and journeys from India's leading architects. No matter what your skill level is, together we'll build on our knowledge and share architecture's greatest stories ever told. Now, here's your host, Manish Paul Simon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Archgyan podcast. This is episode number 35. Today I have with us a very special guest all the way from Australia. This is the founder of this amazing YouTube channel called Aussie BIM Guru for architects and for the BIM industry. This is Gavin Crump. Let me give you a brief on Gavin to give you some context. So Gavin completed his bachelor and master's in architecture from University of South Australia, post which he's got to work for the biggest firms in the industry like HDR, Woods Bagot, Crone Architects, and he's quickly grown from being a BIM coordinator to a BIM manager in a very short period of time. He now runs his own BIM consulting firm called BIM Guru, but what he's most famous for and most widely known for is undoubtedly his YouTube channel. I've personally learned quite a lot from watching his videos, especially the Dynamo videos, because he goes in depth on covering a certain topic, and there's so much to learn from every single video. And on this episode, Gavin is going to be taking us on his journey in architecture, his journey in architecture school, which is University of South Australia, how he picked up on Revit, landing his first job, working his way up from being a BIM coordinator to a BIM manager, starting the Aussie BIM Guru YouTube channel, BIM in Australia, more on his BIM consulting firm, which is the BIM Guru. And towards the end, we switch gears a bit and we talk about the Australian PR, because there are a lot of Indian architects applying for migration to Australia, and his advice is definitely going to help those who have plans to migrate to Australia in the future. So this episode is going to be a blast, and it's going to be jam-packed with a lot of useful information. You can head to archgyan.com/35 for more on the episode and podcast show notes. And also do follow us on Instagram for daily content, where I pick the best from each episode and put it up on our IG page. That said, this is Breaking the Silos with Gavin Crump. He starts off by sharing how he got into architecture. Let's go. All right, let's kick things off. Give us your journey into architecture and how you got started.
Yeah, sure, no worries. So I guess architecture sort of came to me as an option during high school. So I was quite fortunate that I always enjoyed art when I grew up as a kid, and I sort of picked up a passion for maths and physics, and I was always a huge video game fan as well. So putting these all together in my head sort of led me to architecture, and my mother was really helpful. She sort of recommended it to me as well, and it sort of made sense. It was sort of funny because I had a career counselor at school that used to test us and give us a score on which job we were likely to have, and I remember going in and just telling him, I'm going to be an architect, and he was like, no, you've got to take the test, you might not be an architect. And I came back with a 97 for architects, so he was pretty annoyed about that. But yeah, by the time I was in year 10, I was pretty set on going into architecture, even though I didn't really know what BIM was at that point, but I at least liked the sound of architecture and what it could do for me. Yeah.
Awesome. And then you joined University of South Australia, right?
Yeah. So did my bachelor's and my master's there. So 3-year bachelor, 2-year master's.
All right. Could you briefly tell us about the course, and did you feel that 3 years and 2 years was pretty long for a bachelor in architecture?
Yeah, sure. So, it was a great university. I met a lot of great people there, and we had a 3-year bachelor's and 2-year master's, and I was surrounded by a lot of really great buildings on campus. There was a lot of really good details we could look at all the time, and it was a good course to sort of get us interested in architecture. That was one thing I liked about it. It wasn't as focused on technical and technology as it probably is now these days. So I did feel like I sort of missed out on that sort of aspect. There was a lot of focus on sort of architectural theory and history and academia, which obviously doesn't really serve me too much good in the real world, even though it does give me some architects to be inspired by, which is good. But yeah, it was a fun course. I think that the 3 and 2 maybe wasn't quite right. I think that bachelor's was like a little bit too much of an introduction to architecture, and I thought as a result the introduction could probably have been a bit shorter, maybe like 2 years, and they could have put a bit more volume into the master's component. Like I feel like the 3-year bachelor, 2-year master's is it's a very traditional sort of educational breakdown that just seems to be the way it is just because, and then they sort of fill out the curriculum to make it work, which I thought it felt was sort of the case in my degree. Yeah, but that was sort of my experience. I remember you were telling me that I think your weighting where you are is a five bachelors, 2 masters as well, which seemed pretty crazy to me. Like that seemed like way too long in bachelors, and I'd imagine there'd be a lot of repetition in a 5-year cycle in a bachelor's course.
Yeah, in our case, it's all about the money more than the education.
Yeah. I think money is a big motivator for universities. Definitely been seeing a lot of reaction to money, because in Australia we do have quite a bit of there's a bit of a motivator for universities to get international students, because they pay a lot more money than people do in Australia. I think they pay about at least 3 times as much as what we do, which is pretty crazy. But obviously with all the crazy fears about the coronavirus going around, a lot of international students haven't come back this year, so they've been feeling the pain a little bit this year. But yeah, it's definitely a motivator.
All right, awesome. Could you tell us briefly about how you got started with this awesome software called Revit, and how you started picking up Revit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely an awesome software. It's definitely changed my career. When I was at university, I only used AutoCAD and 3D Max and a little bit of SketchUp, and I can't say I was very happy with these programs. They never quite felt like they were really giving me like an intelligent solution, especially in my later years when I was trying to do more challenging buildings, and I really had to push them in 3D Max just to get the forms that I needed. So I never really used Revit during university. We used it in an elective for about, and we were trying out the family editor, which was quite new at the time. I think it was in Revit 6 or Revit 7. So we had a really old version at the time, because I think Revit 2011 or something like that, or so Revit 11 was probably the latest version then. And we also just that it wasn't that good, because I think we were using quite an old version of it, and a lot of the tutors in the universities at that time were quite biased against BIM. I feel like they are a little bit. There's some tutors that are coming back to university now from the industry and sort of changing that narrative. But at the time, BIM was still a little bit, people weren't quite sure to make of it. So I sort of got the impression that Revit was like the enemy of good design. And then when I got out in the real world and submitted my application to 50 places and got one interview and didn't get it because I didn't know Revit, it was a bit of a reality check for what the industry was really doing. So I was very lucky that my first job, I actually just had a family friend that knew an opening on a massive hospital project that was being done entirely in Revit. And I actually went in and had to do a Revit examination to prove that I knew how to use Revit. And of course, I failed it miserably. So as hard as it is to believe, the Aussie BIM Guru, failed his Revit test. So we all start somewhere. But from there, I sort of picked it up and sort of naturally just picked up bits and pieces of the program over time. And I guess, here I am, I guess a very strong advocate for the program.
Awesome. And that BIM Manager did give you a chance right after you failed the test.
Yeah, so I had you saw my video where I got to sit next to the BIM Manager after he let me in. He said, he more or less just said, we can tell that you've got the enthusiasm and we think you'll pick it up. And luckily, I just got to sit next to him for about 2 months and learn how to audit models and what a good Revit model was and how to use Revit carefully. And he was really good, actually. He really gave me a lot of good habits, and he was very cool under pressure because he was managing a team of 80 architects in Revit. So you can imagine just the amount of stress that guy would have been under, and he kept it cool. So I'm still in touch with the guy every now and then. So he reaches out to me maybe every year or so just to see how I'm going. So I was really fortunate. I got given a chance, and I guess it paid off for them, and it paid off for me. Yeah, no problems.
All right, so generally, an architect, or maybe we didn't have BIM managers back then, but they have like quite a long career in architecture, spanning over 2-3 decades before they have a really good position. But you had quite a awesome career in like a short span of time, and you transitioned to a BIM manager. So how did it all happen?
Yeah, so I guess until I really spoke to more people, I just never realized how fast I sort of moved through the roles. I was very fortunate to be given a lot of opportunities by some great people, but also put in a lot of really hard work when a lot of people were probably out, having a bit of a party and a couple of drinks probably on the town.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst I still did, go out and have a few drinks on the town too, because I'm an Aussie and we do that.
So this is every weekend, right?
Oh yeah, we still go out on the weekend, but
Nice.
but I spent a lot of time on my weeknights actually taking Revit home with me and remote desktoping into my work computer and really mastering the program and learning all its inner workings, learning what all the error messages mean, because obviously if you're a BIM manager, you need to know what all those strange warnings mean when someone gets one. But at the same time, I also took like one of my old university projects and rebuilt it from scratch in Revit from the ground up. So I purged the template until nothing was left. And as a result, I learned every little tool, even the really silly ones, like how to build a section head, because there was no section head in the model all of a sudden. So that really taught me just the inner workings of the program. And on top of that, like I said, I got some really good opportunities given to me. So I started off as a BIM technician, but on a really big project. So I got exposure to really good quality BIM modeling and really good quality BIM team management, which imparted a lot of really good qualities onto how I approach Revit and also BIM. And it also encouraged me to learn more about BIM standards, and which got me more interested in international and national standards for BIM as well. So I sort of accelerated my understanding of the bigger picture of BIM. And I obviously moved from my hometown of Adelaide to Sydney about 4 or 5 years ago.
Nice.
And I got given an opportunity by a sector leader in the company at the time in a franchise who said, hey, come BIM manage for us. We know you want to do it, and sort of jumped ship to them. And yeah, it was one of the best opportunities I ever took in my life. So it's been an interesting ride. I've sort of jumped between the roles a bit. So I went from a technician to a sort of a coordinator / model manager to a BIM manager, back down to a coordinator, and then back up to a BIM manager again. And I sort of felt the second time around when I went back to BIM management, and I sort of hit it with a different sort of attitude. I was a bit more mature, a bit older. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, but yeah, lots happened in a short amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a recent video which you released on BIM Manager and what a role he plays, right? So could you briefly tell us about?
I've done a few. I've done one on like the pros and the cons of being a BIM manager, and then I think the one after that was my journey through BIM management, and then the salary grades they go through. I try to put a few videos on my channel that relate more to the industry. It's not just me, showing Dynamo or showing Revit, but sort of giving some context to the BIM management role as well. Yeah.
All right. And what kind of scope of work does a BIM manager do?
Yeah, so I think like a really big thing for a BIM manager is you really have to work with people. Like software is really important. I think a good manager needs to be a master of their software as well. It's hard. You can't just be a master of the software. I think it's important that you're a really strong communicator and you're really receptive to people's problems, because ultimately, like, a BIM manager is sort of like the last line of defense when it comes to the strategy of how to solve a BIM problem or how to prevent a BIM problem from happening in a project or in the company's bigger picture. Like, you might be responsible for literally picking the software platform they're going to use for the next 30 years, which could be obviously like a huge financial commitment. So yeah, it's a pretty intense role. I think their scope, it really varies on the company size and the company type. I think like a small company, you're more responsible for the day-to-day management of like the technicians and making sure the content's all prepared. But in the larger companies, it's more about making those big, heavy decisions about, what software are we going to use for this project and what sort of procurement strategies should we use to deliver this project. Even beyond projects, just, as a company, how do we deliver? What's our documentation strategy? How much automation do we want to look at in our workflows? Or even just being 10 steps ahead of knowing what's going to be the next big thing. There's a lot of like research involved, and just going to events, being aware of things and making sure the right people are aware of you as well, like software vendors. And yeah, there's a lot to it. But it's probably one of the most rewarding roles I've done in my career so far.
Awesome. And I don't know if this is a dumb question, but is a BIM manager involved even after the project is completed during the facilities management and all that?
Oh, yeah. Like any project with an FM component, I think the BIM manager is integral to how that works, because that's usually the point of the project where everyone suddenly realizes that the data is really important, because all these models have to come together and talk to each other in a common way. And most of the time, every company's got their own sort of data structures and their own file formats. And that's when really all the big players and the BIM management sort of team have to come together and make it work. I've been in that situation once, and it was pretty intense. Like there's a lot of finger pointing and, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. But in the end, we all just sort of realized we had to make it work as BIM managers. So it was pretty intense. And there was a lot of data migration, a lot of changing of data structures to bring it all together. But we got a common model in the end that was federated and able to be viewed in an iViewer. So yeah, it's definitely important for BIM managers on big projects.
Awesome. All right, so you've started this amazing gem of a channel called Aussie BIM Guru. I personally learned quite a lot from your videos, especially the Dynamo playlist where you take us from scratch. So
yeah, the learning series.
How did this all start, and what made you decide to start a YouTube channel? And also, how did you come up with the name?
Yeah, no worries. I remember when you first reached out to me through the channel. That's how we met, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started the channel just because I had a lot of things I knew about software and about the industry, and I wanted to share it. Like our industry is pretty well known for building up silos of information and preventing everyone from having access to them without either paying a lot of money for it or just calling it intellectual property and no one ever gets to see it. So a lot of what I did pretty carefully was sort of start sharing workflows and ideas that I thought really deserved to be out in the common environment where people could access them, and not just professionals but students as well, that wanted to get a taste for what they might need to know if they wanted to get into BIM. There's a lot of these things they don't teach it at university, and a lot of the BIM courses don't touch on them in detail either. And there's a lot of students developing content as well on YouTube. So I thought that they needed someone that probably came from a professional angle with some experience from that regard, which I think was a good choice because I've actually spoken to a few of the student content producers now, and they've sort of realize that there's a few things they can learn from what I do, and I can sort of take a step back and look at how they work too. Because I guess a big part of being in BIM is to be flexible, that you need to understand everyone works in different ways, and there's no right way to do things. Sometimes there's better ways, but there's no right way to do things. So that was sort of the main motivation with it. It was sort of a nice way to sort of just take things out of my head and put them on YouTube as well, so that if I need to remember something, I can just go back to my own video.
That's there, yeah.
Like I watch my own videos all the time when I'm trying to remember things. I'm like, one of the most common ones is just how to write a pattern file, I think, in Revit. And I constantly go back to my second video where I made pattern files and just go to that bit where I need to pause on an image and I go, there it is. So it's sort of like my own little encyclopedia as well. And it's a way I can sort of help people that come to me and say, I want to learn more about shared parameters. I'm like, got a shared parameter video done. Like it's too easy. So it saves me a lot of time, I guess, as a consultant and an educator as well, to have these sort of videos available to give to people. And I think you asked too how the name came about as well. So that was so I guess the three words, Aussie BIM Guru, each one's got like a tiny backstory related to it. So I guess I'm Aussie, obviously I'm Australian, and I'm a proud Australian. I think like we're all proud of our countries, and I think it's important to sort of like make that part of our identities when we do these things. I've got a cousin that has like a YouTube channel called the Aussie Wealth Creation Channel. It's got about 50,000 subscribers, so it's pretty big.
Nice.
And he sort of branded his with the Aussie thing, and I just sort of went, I like that. That works. So let's keep it in the family. So he's my cousin, so we have all the Aussie channels. And then obviously guru was just like a term that means someone that knows a lot of things about something, and a few people called me that a few times in my job, so I thought, that sounds cool. So I thought that sort of seemed fitting, and it's sort of like a nickname. They can call me Guru if they want. That happens quite a lot. And then BIM, just because I didn't want it to be just Revit or just Dynamo. I wanted it to relate to the bigger context of what BIM is, and I can pick up other software packages that way that aren't out right now. Maybe something new comes along, and I can still sort of relate it to the channel's name. So yeah, that was sort of all the backstory of the channel.
Awesome. So you released a lot of useful content so far, and we expect a lot more coming. So what can we expect from this year?
Yeah, so I guess I keep a pretty big backlog of videos, and I try to keep myself about 6 months ahead in my head. So I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be doing up until around about maybe September, October. Some people might have seen on my channel, I think someone's commented on it once saying that they can see that I've got all these videos that are private in my playlists, and they're essentially all my videos scheduled for release. I think at the moment I'm about 4 weeks scheduled up.
Nice.
And of those, I'm going to be covering essentially, I'm going to be starting with a few old videos from my channel. I'm going to be remaking some workflows in Dynamo for Revit 2020 because I know a few of my first videos, like the workflows don't work in 2020. So I need to update them because I know they're quite popular because I picked some of the more common topics like putting shared parameters in families and putting views on sheets and things that are really important. So I'll be doing that for about a week, and then I'll be moving on to custom package creation in Dynamo. So how to make custom nodes, how to package them together, and how to release your package out to online or to your company. And then I'll be branching out into what people have been waiting for a long time, which is Python in Dynamo.
Awesome.
So I'll be starting with Python just as a scripting language, and just spending about 2 weeks just doing some quick tips on just basic Python terminologies and a few functions that are really different that make it really useful, like iterating over lists and things like that. If some people might know what that means, if you don't, I guess you'll know in about 4 weeks. and then I'll move on to Python in Dynamo. And probably later on down the line, I'll look at doing a series on Navisworks because I haven't touched on that yet, but I really love that program. And I'll also be probably releasing a free Revit template later on this year, just so I can use it in my videos, and also release it so that people can see what I think best practice is. So like the BIM Guru template, which will have sort of my best of the best sort of content that I'm building right now. So building it all from scratch. So can't wait to sort of share all that with everyone.
And it's all going to be free, right?
Yes, yeah, the template's going to be free, and I'll be releasing a couple of free sample models as well. Because I guess like for my consulting business, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about soon, it's sort of like some free marketing for me as well. Like if people see it and they know who built it, it's sort of like it's a big resume. Essentially, it's going, wow, he can do this. Okay, cool. So it's a really big resume essentially, and it's going to grow some legs. So it's going to jump around the world. I'm sure people will pass it around because it's going to be pretty high quality. So I think it'll be a good thing. And I think there's not really enough free templates out there at the moment. There's a lot of like free content, but there's not really a template where it's all together and it's all working together and you can document it all the same way and it's got all the same parameters. And I think that's really missing from what the industry has right now. So yeah, I just want to release that at least just to put something out there and that way people can download it and follow along at home with my videos as well. And
yeah, even the naming conventions, there's no proper standard, right? So it's great that you're
there's a lot of standards out there, but there isn't really like a standard that the whole world agrees upon.
Yeah.
There's a few like sort of emerging standards coming out, like some ISO standards and some of the British standards that attempt to create naming conventions that are going to probably become like mandated around the world way down the line eventually, once we all get really frustrated and stop caring about what our things are called. We just want someone to tell us what to do, and then we can get back to doing architecture and engineering again. But probably in the meantime, that'll probably be like something I'll put in the template, what I think is like a really friendly naming standard. I mean, my naming standards are very tailored towards data, so like everything's broken up with common separators, so you can sort of pull pieces out of names and process them in Dynamo. And so there'll be a bit of a insight into how my brain works when it comes to Revit, and a lot of things that I've sort of borrowed from what I've tried out in other companies before and just taken little ideas here and there and said, oh, that sort of worked, I'll play with that. And I've sort of innovated on a few systems that I've tried before. So I think it'll be an interesting template for people to try out. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. In some of your videos, you explore Dynamo pretty deeply, right? But what advice would you give to someone who's just starting off with Dynamo?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because I guess like, you're right. In my videos, I like to go pretty deep. I don't want to usually just go, hey, I'm going to press run and watch what happens. I want to really bring them along for the journey, and I try to explain everything along the way. So I think people get that. So sounds like you really get that. So that's great. But my recommendations, I think my biggest one that I always tell people, there's two really important things to learning Dynamo. And the first one is that I always say, walk before you run. So learn the basics before you go and take on the advanced things. Because people just always come to Dynamo and they say, I want to just, copy this person's video and get my script and go back to my job and save time. And unfortunately, it means they don't really understand how they can use Dynamo personally. So if you don't know how to manage lists, for example, that's like a really common problem I find with people coming to me.
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, I ran your script and it didn't work, and I can see they've connected a list wrong. And if they knew about list management, they'd know what they've done doesn't work. They'd be able to read the warning and understand what's going on. But as a result, I have to sort of grab their hand and lead them through the process and go, well, you've got to connect this here now and you've got to do this. So I think
they don't have the custom packages installed as well, right?
Yeah, that's a common issue, or just the wrong versions of Dynamo. So like I've even made a few videos just saying which version of Dynamo should I use, just because I got asked so many times why I don't use 1.3 or 0.9 and all sorts of stuff. I mean, I love that in Revit 2020 they've integrated Dynamo into the build, so you're locked into the version of Dynamo. I'm sure it frustrates all the developers quite a lot because they're being forced to keep up with Revit, but at the same time, it saves a lot of headaches, I'm sure. But yeah, I think back to what I was saying, another thing I always tell people is you've got to find a problem that gives your learning context. So find something that you need to solve, not just a problem you found on the internet that someone's got a video based on, because that's what my videos are. They're me going, hey, I found a problem. Here, we're going to solve it in Dynamo. I sort of do that to give people ideas and then they can innovate on the workflow a little bit. Like I never quite polish the workflow. I never quite do it exactly how I do it in the real world. It's more like a basic concept and then, people can push it a bit further. Like sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, I took your script and I made it so much better. And I'm like, that's good. That's what I wanted. And they're almost sounding like they're like competing with me. And I'm like, no, this is the point of my channel.
Yeah.
So I find sometimes people, they don't have a problem that gives their learning journey the context it needs. Because then when you solve your own problem, it's such a triumph. You're like, yes, I've done it. Like I understand how I solve my own problem, and it makes it more fun. Like when I first used Dynamo, I made a script that essentially numbers every door in the whole project based on the way the door's facing and which rooms are facing either side. So if it's in a corridor, it'll belong to the room, or no matter which way it points. It was a pretty heavy script, and it took me about a month to finish it.
Oh, wow.
But when I finally pressed run and it just worked, it was like, I think I stood up and just fist pumped in the air and went, yes. And everyone's like, what are you so excited about? And then I told them what I'd done, and they were just like, whoa, like what? So it was pretty cool. I think that was back in like 2016, I think that was in. So I think that's really important. And I guess like beyond that, like once you've got better at Dynamo, I think it's really great when people can go and help other people like I have. So joining the Dynamo forums, or just making a YouTube channel, or just reaching out to people around you, going to the user groups and sharing your passion for Dynamo with other people so that the industry can get better at using it and find more value in how it works. Yeah.
And you've also started leveraging GitHub, right?
Yeah, so I basically just started making a GitHub so that every time someone goes on my videos and says, hey, send me the script, I don't have to, because I used to get, that was like probably 1 in every 2 comments on my videos was, can you send me the script? And I used to just send them an email and then delete the comment, because the problem is once someone sees a can you send me the script comment, they're going to ask, can you send me the script? Yeah. So it sort of was my way to just save myself a bit of time. And I sort of realized I may as well do it just so people can keep up to date and they can open the script at home if they haven't got much time, and they can learn really quickly if they know how to use Dynamo a little bit already. Because all my videos are sort of built for someone that doesn't know how to use Dynamo that well. So that I start from the very beginning. Like I'll get the category, I'll get the elements, and once you've done that once or twice, you sort of know how to do it. Yeah. So like I sort of understand that sometimes people don't have time to follow step by step and copy me the whole way. So it was sort of for that as well. And I mean all the developers in Dynamo do it as well. So I sort of just wanted to join that community of people that are sharing knowledge and just distributing what they think is good content. Yeah.
Yeah, and you started with Dynamo and then jumped into Grasshopper, right? So that transition was pretty easy, right, for you?
It was different. Like I think if I'd started with Grasshopper, I would have never made it to Dynamo, and I probably wouldn't have stayed with Grasshopper, just because Grasshopper is very different. It's very geometry and analysis focused. But that's why I needed Grasshopper. So I sort of found purpose in Grasshopper through what Dynamo wasn't that good at doing. So it gave more meaning or context, sort of like what I was saying before, when you need context to why you do something. And the context for me was just because Dynamo's geometry is quite slow. I was trying to do a sun analysis, and there's a package in Grasshopper called Ladybug, which is literally just built to do environmental studies. And it was just like an amazing tool just suddenly to have available. And I find Grasshopper is a little bit more tricky than Dynamo. Like you need to know more about mathematics and more complex geometric functions and the geometry geometry classes are a bit more important in Grasshopper, so meshes versus what they call B-reps, which are just sort of like solids. So it's a bit different. But yeah, I really do like Grasshopper. I found that it's quite a popular platform. It's been around a bit longer, and the community is probably a little bit more stronger. Although Dynamo's community is growing very fast. I try to tell people not to see them as like competitors, because a lot of Grasshopper users go, ooh, Dynamo, and a lot of Dynamo users go, ooh, Grasshopper. And it's just like, just use both. Like, they're great tools. Like, may as well. Like, if you use Revit, use Dynamo.
Inside as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now it's even better. Now we've got Dynamo and Grasshopper in the same environment. So far out, we can have a lot of fun with that. So like it's amazing. I never understand why people are always competing against each other. And I'm like, just use all the tools. Like, they're brilliant when you put them all together. Like, I use Rhino Inside to use Ladybug and Revit now, which is really useful.
Awesome.
So that's pretty fun. But at the same time, I still use Dynamo to do a lot of Revit-based operations. So like, because some things Rhino Inside isn't as good at doing. Like, if you want to say put views on sheets, like you essentially need to write the entire script in Python inside Rhino Inside just to do it. So you may as well just use a couple of the nodes in Dynamo that are already there and just do it a bit more easily until they rebuild every single function in Grasshopper that they have in Dynamo. They're both still really important, and I don't think that's really the goal of Rhino Inside. I think they're both trying to just build on what we can do as an industry.
Yeah, ultimately it's uplifting the industry and the system, right?
Yeah, exactly, and just adding more sophistication to how we can analyze and work with our designs. Yeah.
All right. So you branched out to a consulting firm called BIM Guru, right? So what are the different services you guys provide?
Yeah, so I guess I kicked off BIM Guru at the start of this year, and I've been operating since almost the start of February, a bit later than that. I've got a small client base, but my services so far sort of center around 5 things. So I've got a bit of a more detailed summary if people want to see it on my website at www.bimguru.com.au. But I center myself around 5 core services. So I firstly focus on strategy. So how to implement new software. I'm looking at business strategy, project auditing, and company auditing. So I have some pro formas that I can apply to companies and say, this is how I rate, your score of, how competent, your BIM systems are sitting at the moment, and here's some improvements you could make. I found that service has been quite useful. A couple of companies have really benefited from that already. I've also got Revit services, so Revit content creation and support files. I found content creation is quite in demand still, so that's been nice. I've also got BIM project coordination, because I've got some experience using Navisworks and BIM 360, which I haven't found anyone's looking for just yet, but I'm sure eventually once I sort of get moving a bit faster and some of the bigger companies come to me, they'll probably be looking for that. As well as that, I do visual coding, so I build Dynamo and Grasshopper scripts as a consulting service now. So people come to me with problems and say, I need a solution. They don't even know how the script works, but they just know they need a script. And then I sort of usually reverse brief back, what I think would be the best way for a script to work. And then if they like it, then I build the script for them and off we go. I found that Grasshopper and Dynamo have been about equal. I've done probably the same amount of Dynamo as Grasshopper projects so far, which is interesting, which has been great too, because I've sort of still been learning Grasshopper. So it was a great way for me to reinforce that I'd come a bit further with Grasshopper than I realized. And then my last service is training and education. So I'm putting together some Dynamo and Revit training courses, and might develop some online web integrated training as well. Eventually for paid training. And also I do mentoring as well. So I've had a couple of people that I've mentored so far, and I think they've really benefited from my involvement in their career journey and what they're doing. So yeah, quite a few services, and I'll be releasing a bit of free content as well. I think I mentioned before I've got a Revit template, and eventually I might release some Dino toolbars for Dynamo, and then some sample projects as well, just some content and sort of improve the industry as a quality of industry. Obviously, I want to make money too, don't we all? But at the same time, I just want to improve the industry that I work in as well, because it needs improvement.
And you're doing this all on your own, right?
come down the line, I want to find a way to take in employees, ideally that are quite early in their journey, that are still learning the industry and want to learn it from a BIM management and a business perspective. My big picture is I'd love to almost take in like graduates out of university and sort of process them through to the industry as BIM coordinators or BIM managers. So they sort of learn the ropes through working with BIM Guru, and then I let them sort of move on to companies and sort of plant them in companies to help them sort of realize their true journey. Unless they want to be consultants, obviously that's a different story, and then maybe that's a different direction for the company. But for now, it's just me. I think probably at least maybe 2 or 3 years I'll be doing my own thing, just because I'm currently a sole trader, soon to be proprietary limited probably. But
Nice.
but to take on employees, you take on a lot of financial burdens as well. And I'm currently funding the business myself with no loans, so it's probably not quite the right time to reach out that far. And I'm sort of still learning about business acumen and how to operate a business, and loving that side of it too, really liking the business management aspect, but would rather sort of get on top of that and master it before I sort of reach out to the next step.
Awesome. Yeah, and you also spoke about not taking up too many clients and just focusing on the business for 2 to 3 months before.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess I sort of, when I first kicked off, I actually started the business on the 1st of January. I registered the domain and the name, and I was sort of moving from there. I remember telling my partner I wouldn't start until the 15th of January, and I started on the 2nd of January, so obviously couldn't wait. I did about maybe almost 2 months, not quite 2 months, about a month and a half of business development. So just setting up everything that the business needed. So like having a lawyer to review all my contracts. I mean, obviously drafting my contracts in the first place, having all sorts of templates and just things to let the business run, having like an accounting system and job numbering systems, everything to keep it operating and sort of keep it moving at a speed that I can maintain on my own. But yeah, it was really important to do that. Like I highly recommend anyone that is opening a small business that they should just set aside about a month where you don't expect to take on clients, and ideally you just don't take on clients. You tell yourself to get everything in order first. Obviously, make sure you get insurance, all that stuff. That took a while. I know some companies out there that they're not insured, and my God, like the risks are huge. So some of those things were really important to get in place first, and they're definitely not things you can do overnight. So it was really important to just know that when I went out to the market, I went out with confidence. But I haven't like sort of done like what I call like a loud launch yet, where I say, hey everyone, I'm on the market, come work with me. It's more like I've sort of just been working through a few small clients to begin with, just to get a feel for the business, and then once I know like I'm ready to hit the market really hard, I'll be, I'll be out on LinkedIn telling the whole world, and yeah, it'll be launching pretty hard from there, but probably about 2 months away from that, I'd say, just because I'm working quite passively at the moment in my marketing strategy.
Yeah, and that is a huge market for BIM in Australia, right? Even though it's not compulsory and all that.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of consultants already in Australia. There's some companies, some individuals, and they're all doing really well. They've actually all been really supportive as well. Like I know a lot of the consultants really closely in Sydney, and they gave me a lot of great advice, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of opportunities to work with them down the line as well. But yeah, it's a great time to be a BIM consultant. The market's just picking back up after hitting a bit of a slump. The infrastructure market's booming right now, so that's probably where a lot of the work is in Australia, but also with consultants too. So it's looking like a really positive year coming up.
And do all projects require BIM in Australia?
I'd say yes. Maybe not BIM, but at least 3D modeling. Because I find that, clients these days, they do know that 3D modeling is not as hard as it used to be. Say 20, 30 years ago, if you had a 3D model, it was like, wow, like you must have got that outsourced or something like that. Some graduate had 3ds Max in the office or something like that. Yeah. Whereas now it's just a given. You can almost just download like Twinmotion now and just build a 3D model for free. So it's like if you need BIM, that's probably another question, because BIM implies you've got like a data-rich model. You've got some client obligations to deliver like a BIM deliverable. And I'd say for like really small projects, like a single dwelling or something like that, probably not. I think like a company could really benefit from using BIM in that sort of scale, because you can really quickly build a template for your houses and just smash them out really fast. Like BIM can save so much time for small scale projects if you have a good template, but it's a nightmare if you don't, because obviously project, it's like building it from scratch every time. But I'd say like for big projects, like to me, it's just a no-brainer these days. Like the amount of time and money that you can save through working in BIM, and the time and money you can save from finding clashes before they appear on site. It's just it's almost hard to imagine delivering a big project without BIM. These days, like I'm still amazed when I hear people of delivering projects entirely in AutoCAD, and just the amount of work that it must involve to keep drawings in line. And I think these days, I'd say nearly all projects would need BIM.
All right. And how is the Australian government and the private sector collaborating in developing the use of BIM?
Oh, yeah. So there's been some really great initiatives we've seen through particularly the health department and sort of the defence department, but also in particular the transport sector. They've really been pushing for some standardisation of BIM. They actually have a lot of templates and a lot of public standards that they release and that they sort of hold their consultants to. Some of them are based on the British standards or the PAS 1192 framework. And a couple of them are sort of catching up to the ISO 19650 standard and then the British National Annex in terms of how to number and manage assets and drawings. So that's been really great. The health sector is really interesting. They actually provide a Derofus database with all their content in it when you start working with them. So that's pretty intriguing. So I think there's been some great initiatives there. Some sectors are still catching up. I know the education sector is still sort of building their framework based on what the health sector did. But we noticed that the private sector is a bit different. It really varies from client to client. Sometimes it might be a developer with no expectations of BIM, and other times it might be someone that thinks they know what BIM is, but they don't, and people don't tell them what BIM is. And it really varies in the private sector. But public, there's a lot of great initiatives taking place.
Awesome. And could you mention any few projects that you feel that BIM has been adopted like in the right way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first project I worked on, to me, that felt like a successful adoption of BIM at a very early stage. Like the client was on board, the state health department was using room data sheets and room layout sheets that were being generated from the model, and they understood that there was a model. All the coordination was happening in 3D and Navisworks, which is really impressive. And this is like super early. This is like 2012.
Wow.
So 8 years ago. It had like 80 architects. I think it was more than 80 engineers, all using Revit and Navisworks to coordinate. And then once they got on site, I think they were trying to use the BIM model on site. So that was a really successful implementation of BIM to me. They did have a full asset management handover as well. I wasn't there for that stage, but I understood that they did have a fully federated model as a deliverable. So to me, that was pretty successful. And the budget runover wasn't too bad compared to other projects of its type. I think I can't remember the budget runover that they released, but it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like the sort of runover that we see on transport projects these days that still use a lot of AutoCAD. I mean, we see like billions of dollars in runover on some projects in transport with the state government. But this one, I think, only went over like a couple of $100 million on a $2 billion project. So that was pretty good. And I think like there's some other projects I've heard of overseas, like the Egyptian Museum, for example. I know that that's a massive project in BIM, and that's been going on for many years now. I know that they've really integrated a 4D and a 5D cost estimation system in there quite heavily.
Nice.
So they've been keeping an eye on that project too, and obviously like anything by Zaha, like I've got mad respect for what they're doing. Really pushing the limits of form and materiality, and also pushing the software with Grasshopper and Rhino. So yeah, there's some great work they're doing there. I keep tabs on one of their staff called Eckhart. He's doing some really good jobs in Grasshopper, but also in Dynamo as well. So yeah, really impressed by what they're doing. But yeah, there's a lot of great things going on in the world.
Awesome. And do you feel that BIM in Australia would be more widely adopted in the coming few years and the maturity level would increase?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's only natural that as time goes forward, things have to get better. I think at the moment, like we're sitting between BIM level 1 and BIM level 3. I don't think that many people in Australia would be sitting at BIM level 3, if any, because the requirements of BIM level 3 just aren't being demanded by many clients yet. But some clients are demanding level 2, so they're demanding facilities management handover in the form of digital twins. So I think that over time we're going to see this digital twin movement influence what BIM does a lot more.
For the benefit of our listeners, could you just tell us what exactly are the different levels and also what digital twin is?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, level one, from what I understand, I think that can almost be like 2D CAD. From what I understand, it's pretty much not even BIM. It's information in a program, in a drawing, but it doesn't necessarily have to have 3D coordinatable elements. Doesn't have to have embedded data. From what I understand, I could be wrong. That might be level 0, but I think level 1 is almost not BIM. Level 2 is like a fully integrated data model that has like cost, time, and facilities management driven initiatives. And level 3 goes far beyond that. It's looking at interoperability standards. So I think it entails things like COBie standards. So data modeling in the software itself. So it's pretty far beyond what most people are doing on their projects right now. There's some people that are really pushing it in the UK, but yeah, here right now probably not. Yeah, but I think things like digital twin will push more of an emphasis on the 4+ dimensions of BIM, which really strengthen the chance of delivering a BIM level 2 model, and going beyond that to level 3 when data becomes really important.
Yeah, and there are a few cities which are making the digital twins of themselves, right? Like London and
I think there's like the Boardwalk project in San Francisco. I think it is that I think Microsoft is leading, or is it Google? I think it's Google.
Yeah.
Google Sidewalk. I think they're aiming to have like a fully like smart integrated modeled city, and even in Sydney, like the city of Sydney collects all the digital models of all the buildings and sends out the models when you're doing a development application. So there's very like basic versions of digital cities already sort of forming, and then there's some more complicated sort of localized projects like the Sidewalk project that we're seeing.
Yeah, the tech giants are also getting into the space, right? Like Samsung.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, we're seeing. I think it's Microsoft is partnering with Willow. So they were probably one of the most early adopters of digital twin logic. And they're partnered with Microsoft, and they're using the Azure platform to really get on board. And we're seeing some really interesting movements in the market coming from there. They're really getting on board. I think they've really noticed too that there's a lot of disruption that can come through our market as well. So obviously disruption usually leads to money and profit. So I think they definitely, realized very intelligently that they can, really do a lot of pretty solid work in our industry. So I look forward to seeing what they can do with it.
All right. And do you feel that when we get too technical with things and we learn too much about BIM, we compromise on our creative abilities as architects?
Yeah, I do. It's a really hard question to answer, but I think over the years, I have realized that we do sometimes stray a bit too far from architecture when we get very technical. We can spend so long trying to solve like a problem that's really small when we lose sight of the bigger picture. I guess that there's a bit of a challenge in that the industry is sort of pulling in lots of different directions, and BIM's just one of them. So sometimes, like as a BIM manager, I even had to take a step back and realize that, whilst BIM was the most important thing to me on the project, it wasn't to everyone else, and maybe the profits weren't all coming from BIM. So yeah, it definitely can be a pretty big distraction when it's not managed and sort of communicated amongst the team clearly, and the true value add of certain decisions isn't understood. So yeah, no, I would agree. I think if people blame BIM for like the lack of design quality, I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say that, which is an argument that I hear quite a lot. People saying that, Revit came and ruined how we design. And I said, no, I think we just got a bit lazier as an industry and sort of focused more on making profits and less on outputting good design. And BIM became the excuse to generate a quick 3D model and say, look, Mr. Client, we've made a big 3D model work. So it sort of became a distraction in the wrong way, in that the corporate sort of mindset kicked in and said, hey, we can make quick money from this. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer though. Yeah, it really depends on the context, but I'd say a lot of the time it's true.
Awesome, Gavin. A lot of good stuff. I just want to switch gears a bit. There's a lot of Indian architects applying overseas for migration and PR, right? And I'm sure a lot of Indian architects are applying to Australia for the Australian PR. So what advice would you give to the architects seeking to work and live in Australia?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's super relevant because I guess, as you know, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and so are a lot of Indians looking for work, as I found out. I get a lot of requests for people looking for a job, or just I like when they're looking for advice. I find it a bit harder when they're just asking me to hire them. because usually, obviously, I'm one person. I'm not going to go and hire someone from the other side of the world and somehow find the money to sponsor them for a visa. But I think like there's a few tips I've sort of gathered over time. I might make a video about it eventually too, just so I can link them to the video and say maybe this helps.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And I know a little bit about the process because my roommate's actually from Cairo, and he just became an Australian citizen the other week. So he's been through like a really intense visa process over about, I think, 8 years. So it's pretty intense, and it costs a lot of money too. So that's my first advice: like save money. It's not cheap. There's a lot of green barriers to go through, which is basically just spend some money here, spend some money there. Like usually you need to get like a visa agent. Currently, I think the process is, I think it's called a subclass 482 or something like that.
189 yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, 189 and the temporary skill shortage visa. So there's a few programs you can apply through, but essentially the key is finding a company that wants to sponsor you on the program. That's the hard part. And I think that's why I think like usually my advice relates more to building up experience and trying to get the most out of your current situation before you move on. So getting the most out of your opportunity in India before you look abroad, because there's probably a lot of opportunity where you are. You just need to look a bit harder. Maybe apply to a company that's not going to pay you the best salary for a while. I find the outsourcing companies can be good to work for because they get clients from overseas that have connections, and they also push BIM a little bit harder than some of the traditional firms do, from what I understand. So I think that's a really viable avenue to look through. And they have really strong connections to like Autodesk as well. So there's a lot of passive marketing you can do through there rather than just going through LinkedIn. I find too, like maybe like taking some emphasis off being a fresher. Like I find a lot of people use the terminology fresher all the time. And I find like sometimes it's almost like people are like putting themselves down for being too inexperienced. I think like understanding that, you do have some experience is important, and sort of marketing yourself with some confidence too. Unless you literally have no experience and you're just a fresher. But I find a lot of the time people, they might be like 3 years out and they still call themselves a fresher. And it's like, nah, you've got experience. Come on. And I think too, what else? I had like a few notes for this one because I know it was really important. I think like usually what I do when I get someone that comes to me, sometimes they really draw it out. They go like, hello, sir. And I like what they're polite, but they have like sort of a script that they go through where it's like, hello, sir. How are you? How's the weather? Where do you work? And it's like, just come on, just ask me. I know you're going to ask me. Just be honest. It's fine. It's like usually I'm pretty friendly to most people that come to me, unless they're rude to me. I'm not rude to them. I understand that everyone's looking for opportunity, and that's fine. I've been there before as well. Like I said, I applied to like 50 firms when I first started looking for work, so I can totally relate. But at the same time, like just sometimes it's good to just be like, hello, I'm looking for job opportunities. Have you got any advice? I'm more likely to respond well to that than like a really drawn out conversation. So I think that's really important too. And, don't just use LinkedIn too. Like LinkedIn's it's almost a bit like Facebook these days. Like it's not the most, I guess, like professional network compared to what it used to be. So I think it's like harder to find work on LinkedIn than just going to like websites like www.seek.com.au, which is a really good website in Australia that you can find jobs through and sort of apply for visa sponsorship in your actual applications. So I think that's probably mainly it. And obviously just upskill, keep learning new things, keep relevant, keep learning new software. Even if your company just uses AutoCAD, try to find a way to access like a student version of a program or something that you can access. Obviously, legally, I'm not going to endorse, keeping a student version after university, but I know a lot of people do, but I can't endorse it. But just find ways to keep your skills relevant. Take courses if you want, but don't take too many courses, because courses don't usually get you jobs. The skills you get from those courses are what get you the jobs. So don't put like 50 certificates on a CV. Put your strong skills on it and put maybe like 3 or 4 courses on there just to show what sort of things you studied. So hopefully that sort of helps give some tips to people looking for work.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice. And to wrap it up, what one advice would you give young architects and architecture students getting started?
Yeah, so I guess probably the main thing is just to network, reach out to people like me, just people that you see around your university campus that have connections to the industry, because it's really important to come in knowing people in the industry, or just at least knowing how the industry works, knowing which companies are important to connect with, because maybe they've got a lot of projects going on. So be aware. Don't spend every weekend going out having a drink. Like sometimes put in the hard yards and understand that not everything is going to come from university. Some things do come from a bit of hard work and a bit of elbow rubbing on networking events. Yeah. So just find opportunities wherever you can, and I guess as well, like just don't necessarily hit the industry with high expectations of what the industry should give you. Like come in pretty flexible. So don't expect like a really high salary, or you're not going to get out at 5 o'clock every day. It's there's going to be some long hours, and you probably have a lot of those what am I doing here sort of moments, and just be ready for challenge, because it is a challenging industry. Architecture and engineering and even construction, they're hard industries for graduates, and they're expected to learn a lot of things very fast. So just come in with an open mind, and just be ready to put in some really hard work before you get to the good stuff.
Awesome, Gavin. That's some really good advice, and I'm sure our listeners will learn a lot. We'll just quickly jump into the quickfire round, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, no worries. Let's do it.
All right. Which book has inspired you the most as an architect?
Yeah, so probably the one that I like the most is called Minimal. It's by my favorite architect called John Pawson, and it's just a collection of images from his projects and around the world that he collected that sort of inspired me to be more passionate about the movement of minimalism. So I'm a huge fan of minimalism and brutalism in architecture, nice. And this sort of like was what inspired that in my architectural style.
Nice. What type of music do you listen to?
So I listen to heavy metal and death metal, so it's pretty intense stuff. So if anyone knows heavy metal, I guess my favorite bands are Arch Enemy, Meshuggah, Trivium, Amon Amarth, and anyone that doesn't know heavy metal, I probably just said a whole bunch of evil-sounding words. Sound like I'm trying to summon the devil or something like that. But surprisingly, it actually keeps me really like calm and relaxed when I listen to it. I used to like put on headphones sometimes at work and just chuck on music, and I forgot that it was too loud, and someone would just look at me and be like, "What the hell are you listening to?" But I've been really into heavy metal since about year 11, year 12. I really like the polyrhythms and the instruments and all the really intense guitar work, and the vocals can be a bit strange sometimes, but yeah, I've come to appreciate them.
Yeah, even I listen to a couple like Lamb of God and
I love Lamb of God. Awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Wicked. Their new song's intense.
Yeah, I should check it out. I haven't been listening to it for a while.
Definitely. The first 20 seconds are amazing.
Nice. All right. What would you have chosen had you not taken up architecture?
Easy. I would definitely have either been in software engineering or game design. I was a huge fan of video games as a kid, and I sort of learnt to build very basic 16-bit video games when I was like a bit younger. So I realized that it was a really hard industry to make it in. I had a lot of friends that tried that were a bit older, and they just said, "Oh, don't do it. It's so competitive and you need like heavy connections." So I just said, no, I'd rather go somewhere where the job prospects are a bit better for me. But yeah, if I hadn't done architecture, I would have definitely went down that road.
Right.
But I'm sort of glad I did architecture. I think like BIM was probably a better fit for what I like doing, whereas game design probably would have been a bit too close to like a hobby for me. And I like being able to just play a video game and not relate it to work. Whereas I guess if I was in video game design, I couldn't just go and play BIM on the weekends.
And BIM is not that popular compared to these professions in schools, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Like, I mean, everyone wants to be a game designer if they use computers these days. And I can see why with platforms like Unity coming out that are really making game design like very accessible. Whereas back when I was looking at game design, you had to like literally write everything in C# and Java and all these crazy languages that no one learnt until they went to university. So, yeah, it was a bit too intimidating for me as well.
All right. Which city would you consider your favorite?
Oh, I've got two, but I'd say probably New York is my favorite. It's such a dynamic city. Like you can walk between one block to the next, and like it's a whole different culture, especially around like the Soho, Little Italy sort of area. Yeah. It's amazing, just the city planning. As an architect, like every corner's got a famous building on it. It's just like, oh wow, I didn't know this was here. It's just like you keep finding a building every time you turn around a corner. It was amazing. Like I think I bored my partner to death when I went there because everything was just buildings and architecture architecture the whole time, but I loved it. And I also went to Tokyo with my father a few years ago, and Tokyo was the same thing. Every little district of Tokyo had such a different character, and it was such a clean, easy to get around city, and the people were like so friendly. Like the people in New York weren't the same sort of friendly. Okay. They were more like they were easy to get along with, but they were busy and they had things to do. Whereas in Tokyo, if you had someone that like had things to do, if you needed any help, they just dropped what they were doing straight away, and their goal was just to like help you. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'd be traveling a lot once BIM Guru and Aussie BIM Guru.
Oh yeah. I really hope that there's the opportunity to travel in my work. That would be fantastic, even just to run training courses or go to like Autodesk University and opportunities. Yeah.
All right. So you do you hustle and you do a lot of things, right? So how do you make it happen? Yeah. What does a daily routine in Gavin's life look like?
Oh man, like every day is slightly different, but I guess like on a work day, like I'm usually, actually no matter what day it is, I always get woken up at 4:00 in the morning by my cats. That's the time they decided is breakfast. Unfortunately, some cats decide breakfast is at 9:00. My cats think it's 4 a.m. So I haven't really been able to adjust their sleep cycle.
By the way,
cycle.
guys,
so
Gavin's cats are pretty famous. You can check them out on Aussie BIM Guru channel as well.
Yeah, one of them's actually called Aussie, and the other one's called Edward.
Oh, nice.
So one's named for the channel as well. They're 1 year old each, so they're still quite adventurous and they've got a lot of energy. So I'm hoping as they get older, they might change their wake up time. But usually I feed them and I'll go back to bed, and I'll usually just go on LinkedIn and get rid of all my notifications before I go back to bed, so I can wake up with a clean social media slate. On a weekday, I'll get up around 8, and I'm usually working by 8:30 at my desk. Sometimes I'll do exercise before work. I find that can be good to do every couple of days. Just go for a run before I go on my computer, just so I sort of distance myself between sleep and work. There's like that barrier, because I used to get on the bus and go to work, whereas now I just walk a few meters to my desk. So it's nice to have a bit of a buffer between that sometimes. And I usually work I usually have like a small lunch in between, but I tend to work right through to 6 or 7 and just do a hard slog. Like when I've got some more regular clients, I'll probably find a more balanced time to work in, but at the moment I'm just sort of pushing all my leads and working pretty hard. So that's usually what I do, and I put a lot of research and development in that time as well. So I do a lot of like Python and sort of juggle my time between the day, and then usually I'll do like Aussie BIM Guru videos probably twice a week. I try to do it just so I can keep up to date. And they take about 2 or 3 hours to put together typically. So I tend to do those at night. So some days it's like all days work, and some days I do no work at night. And then I see my partner a couple of days a week as well. So she comes around and we, watch some Netflix and play video games and all that stuff. And then, usually in bed by about 12. So it's a pretty intense cycle, and I'm definitely going to have to like find a way to rebalance it, unless my cats can get up a bit later. So.
Awesome. So your cats is definitely a motivation, but how do you keep yourself motivated being a solo one-man army?
Yeah, I think like a really important thing that I do that I highly recommend everyone else does if they're in BIM is to get on social media, get on Twitter, use LinkedIn a little bit, but I think Twitter's where it's at. Like I get a lot of interaction out of Twitter, talking to like all the Dynamo package developers and just seeing what everyone's up to in architecture. There's a lot of like the who's who of BIM and architecture on Twitter, and they're much more active there than they are on LinkedIn. So I find that sort of gives me a bit of connection back to the real world. Obviously that's not the real world, so I still go out probably like twice a week just to catch up with someone here and there, just to see real people and stay connected to the industry. And I go to like all the user groups and all the free events in the city for BIM. Nice. So I still catch up with all the BIM managers in Sydney at those events and all the consultants when I see them there, just so I still have like a presence in the market. And one day I'll probably move into the city and get like a desk or an office, just to be in the city and actually be right next to clients rather than having to get on the bus every time someone wants to see me. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Gavin, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Well, it's a hard question, but I think ideally I'll still be pushing away at BIM Guru. This is really my long-term goal now. I've sort of just realized that the BIM management role was nice, but I wanted to reach more people through what I did. And I expect in at least the next 10 years that BIM will change. BIM won't be BIM in 10 years. It will be something else. It will be a whole different thing. Maybe it's all VR. Maybe all our brains are going to be plugged into computers. I mean, who knows? Yeah. It could be anything. But I want to be pushing my business wherever it becomes. And ideally I'll be
taking in employees or taking interns through the process of the business and then launching them out as BIM coordinators or something like that. That would ideally be in motion by then. And I guess personally, I'd love to, have a family by then as well. I mean, if I haven't got a family in 10 years, I'll be 41 and not a dad, so that's probably getting a bit late for me. So ideally, I'd have one kid or two kids, whatever I can afford, I guess. It depends how well BIM Guru does. But yeah, that's ideally the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully you'll get married in 2-3 years time, I guess.
I didn't tell my partner that. She gets too excited. But I don't know if I'll buy a house in Sydney. Sydney's real estate is insane. It's like the median house price is more than $1 million.
Oh, wow.
So it's very hard to buy a house in Sydney. So I might look at moving somewhere else, either in Australia or overseas. But yeah, not sure yet. We haven't really figured it out yet. I've only been dating my partner for a couple of years, so we haven't quite got to that conversation yet. But we'll see what happens.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome, Gavin. That was a great session, although we had to do it twice. Because the first time my laptop crashed. So
yeah, that's all right. I think it went better the second time around anyway. So it was probably a good thing. Yeah, I think we got a really good banter and good conversation going there. Because Aussie people, we love what we call banter, which is like a back and forth conversation where we sort of joke around and have a bit of fun. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope to have you more on the episode and on the podcast and discuss in depth on certain topics.
Yeah, definitely. And if you ever want to do podcasts with multiple people, if you want to get Christopher on at the same time and do a bit of a round table that could be cool as well. But I really appreciate you having me on, Manish, and I had a really good time. So definitely recommend people tune into your podcast in future.
Yeah, and what's the best way our listeners can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. I mean, if you want to contact me just for questions or general, contact me through Aussie BIM Guru. So you can either come to my YouTube channel and there'll be a link to my GitHub, or you can also just contact me at aussiebimguru@gmail.com. If you want to contact me for business, I have BIM Guru. The website is www.bimguru.com.au, and feel free to also just reach out to me through LinkedIn. I typically will accept most connections if they're relevant to what I do. So if you're in anything to do with AEC, if you request a connection, you'll probably get an acceptance in about an hour. So yeah, just feel free to reach out through any of those avenues. I'm always happy to give tips to anyone, even if you're just looking for advice on your career and you just want me to give you some ideas. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and I think you get better ideas more, and the more number of people reach out to you, right?
Exactly, yeah. A lot of my ideas for my videos aren't always my ideas. They're something that someone worked through with me. And then I say, hey, do you mind if I put this on my channel? And typically I'll credit them at the start as well and say, oh, thanks to this person for this idea. So, yeah, it's always a two-way giving. So, yeah, it's a valuable process.
Awesome, Gavin. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. I hope to have you more often in the episode because there's so much of value that you provide. And
yeah, thanks, Manish. I really appreciate it. And I'm more than happy to come back again. So had a great time.
All right. Cheers.
You've been listening to the Archgyan podcast. We're still building the community. Please share this knowledge with someone you know who could benefit. Just send them to archgyan.com, where you'll find our free newsletter and for more podcast episodes. Search for the show on any major podcasting platform. Don't forget to subscribe where you're listening right now. And if you liked it, leave a rating or review.